Welcome to University Drive, your pathway to the transformational work of University of the Bahamas. Our mission is to advance and expand access to higher education, promote academic freedom, drive national development, and build character through teaching, learning, research, scholarship, and service. Our goal is to build a better Bahamas by shaping tomorrow's leaders today, finding solutions to challenges, and forging new opportunities for growth. University Drive, where faculty, staff, students, and alumni travel the road of progress together with you. And now, here's your host.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tamika Lundy, your host for this episode of University Drive. The world has changed quite dramatically in an infectious disease pandemic, depressed economies, and calls to increase sustainability. The status quo model of tourism is less and less relevant and prosperous. What can and should the Bahamas do to evolve its own tourism product? What are the principles that should be guiding that transformation? Should it be driven by sustainability, responsibility, regeneration? Joining us for this episode is Professor of Sustainable Tourism and Dean of Graduate Studies and Research at University of the Bahamas, Dr. Vigneswaran Nair, who is also the editor of the new publication, Responsible Rural Tourism in Asia. Thank you for being here, Dr. Nair, and leading us in this conversation. What is the state of tourism now in the aftermath of COVID-19, severe economic turmoil, and natural disasters? What's your take on that?
So if you look at the crisis that we are facing currently, it has changed the tourism industry. Although the tourism industry is regarded as a resilient industry that has withstood many crises over the decades and centuries, but this particular crisis is quite different. Okay, so if you see in the past, we have withstood environmental crisis because of hurricane, storm surge. We have withstood political and economic crisis, and now with this health crisis, it is also impacting our economic crisis. So despite all these crises, tourism has always bounced back. That is how tourism is. But COVID-19 have made the change that we need to restructure the way how we operate. When you look at the global impact this pandemic has created in tourism industry based on UNWTO's statistics, the pandemic have set the tourism sector back by $1 trillion, $1 trillion. That's huge. Global tourism have suffered a crushing blow in 2020 with the drop in international tourist arrival across the globe. 55% in the Americas, 57% in Africa, 65% in Europe, and a whopping 72% in Asia Pacific. So that is giving us an average of about 65% across the whole world. So the virus have actually cut international tourism arrivals by half. It has also impacted the airlines. It has impacted the cruise industry. So the question is, who is most vulnerable to COVID-19 impact as far as tourism is concerned? Obviously, countries that are over-reliant on tourism, they will feel the pinch. Okay, countries in the Caribbean, including the Bahamas, we will really feel the impact. Why? 48% of our GDP is reliant on tourism, and 60% of our employment is related to tourism. So post-COVID-19, the crisis will certainly reshape the industry's future landscape. As we speak, a new norm is taking shape. There's still a lot of uncertainties. We are still testing out a lot of things. However, what is certainly certain is we cannot operate as before. Business as usual approach is going to be a disaster for us. All tourism related stakeholders must innovate a new approach. You have no choice. The current crisis is not just one-off. We may be facing similar or different crises, or maybe more frequent crises in the future. remember your environment is changing as well at the same time. The essence of a resilient tourism destination is how we are able to regroup ourselves, reevaluate, rebuild, and recover. Uh, the key here is to advance despite any adversity that we are in. But if we continue to operate the same and expect things to change, then we are in a rude shock. So the tourism industry have to evolve.
You said something that I find to be very interesting. You said a word, and that word is responsible within the context of tourism, responsible tourism. So when you think about how to be a little bit more adaptive in the way that we envision tourism and advance tourism, and you pair that with responsibility, what does that model look like in its application?
See, there's always a big confusion when you use the terminology of sustainable tourism versus responsible tourism. Sustainable tourism is a huge philosophy that is out there. We want to achieve a certain sustainable approach economically, environmentally, and socially. But for a layman, for the stakeholders, for the operator, for the tourists, for the government, it is very difficult to conceptualize the whole model of sustainability. But then when you use the word responsible, it is much easier. Responsible tourism. What is the responsibility of every single stakeholder in the industry? If a tourist is going to a destination, what is his responsibility? What are the do's and don'ts that he should or shouldn't do? If an operator, the industry, the hotel, the restaurant, what is their responsibility to ensure that the industry is well managed environmentally, socially, and also economically? What is the role of the government? What is the role of the NGO, all the stakeholders? So this term responsible tourism have been introduced to tackle that issue of this vagueness in the whole concept of sustainability. Because sustainability, when you talk about the word sustainable tourism, it basically boils down to that the three pillars, your three P's here, your people, the profit, and the planet, which is actually your social, the economy, and the environment. You're trying to find the right balance so that it works. But we know in most destination it doesn't work. You cannot find the right balance. You can't always say that there will always be a balance. No, in some destination the environment is key. In some destination the people is key. So you cannot have a three circle that you always see whenever they talk about three pillars, three balance circle. But in reality it's not going to happen, because in addition to the three P's, you may also have the fourth P, the political situation of the country, the governance, the enforcement, what sort of laws that you put in place. All that is as important. So responsible tourism is key for the industry to function in a way that is going to attract more tourists, more responsible tourists. So our aim is not to just attract mass tourists that is going to destroy, but we want to attract responsible tourists that is going to do more good to the destination that they are going. If you're going to attract the wrong group of people, irresponsible tourists that is going to be attracted to your destination, then you defeat the whole purpose of the whole concept of responsible tourism. So it goes across all the dimensions, your environmentally, social, culturally, and also economically. So responsible tourism basically looks at the three pillars here. Although the pillars are similar to the sustainable tourism, but it's much easier for us to visualize when you say how responsible is the stakeholders. When you have the stakeholders that are responsible, then you will find the industry, without you realizing, is being very responsible. The country is being responsible. The whole tourism sector will become responsible.
Dr. Nair, don't you need also the political will in order to see responsible tourism come to fruition? I look at the Bahamas, and when you think of all of the disasters that we have suffered through, a lot of it really outside of our control, don't you need the political will in order to make changes so that you can move forward with responsible tourism?
Yes, exactly. So it is not just the three P's. So the fourth P, which is political. So when you talk about the political dimension, it includes everything: the whole organization, the governance, the law, the justice, the communication, the security, every single thing, the ethics. So if you look at countries that do not have a will in terms of trying to move the tourism industry, there's a problem. So the political will is critical for a successful tourism destination. But the biggest problem that most countries face is most political system, they work based on this 5 year system. So you want to do something within your 5 years, and then things goes off very badly if you do not have a proper master plan in place that is going to take the tourism industry for the next 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. Then you have a problem, because you are over relying on who is in power and what do they want to do, or what they want to achieve during that 5 years. So that is a big problem that you face in many destinations across the globe. So you keep questioning whether is this politically driven, or is this really driven for the economy, or is it really driven to protect the environment? You start questioning. You start questioning, is this responsible or is this not responsible? I'm sure we have a lot of those experience here, even in the Bahamas. So we keep questioning whether is this responsible or irresponsible. So of course, whichever government of the day will want to do something that is good during the period of their tenure as holding in power of their office. But what is important at the end of the day is the local community, how it impacts them economically, how it impacts them environmentally, because a lot of the decision that we make may be very short term. In the long term, the impact may be even worse, and you don't even see, because you're so focused on achieving something in that very short term period, in terms of economic development. Okay, I see this coming. Oh, a lot of fun is going to come economically. I'm going to be doing well, but it's only in the short term. But in the long term, if there is a massive environmental impact because of a particular project, then you got to start looking at it. How is this going to help me 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road? Is this destination going to be totally destroyed after that? So again, it comes back to the political will. So the political will, you're right, is really critical. The balance of any responsible destination will depend on the political will. It will depend on who is in power and what are their contribution towards the sustainability of the tourism industry.
So that master plan for tourism development then becomes very pivotal, because that should be your guide, or one of your guides, along with, I would imagine, a national development plan. I know that you, through the university, have been working with the Tourism Development Corporation, I believe it is.
Yes.
How do you build the discipline or have that paradigm shift to where you're really guided by being responsible and sustainable and not deviating, even in the decisions that are made with respect to things that directly impact tourism and building out the environment and the developments that are approved? How do you build in that approach into the decision making?
I think what is critical is actually the master plan. So we need a master plan. So in fact, we do. There is already the draft national development plan, but as we are aware, this plan was never really fully utilized. It never got through the approval of the parliament. And as a result, it has stayed as a document. But if you look at the tourism industry itself, yes, a master plan is needed, because the plan is to move the industry for a longer period of time. So we need to ensure that the tourism industry is able to sustain for a long period of time and not for the short period of time. So we want to stay away from short-term economical goals and forget about the long-term environmental and social cultural degradation. So the tourism master plan that is adopted in parliament, which is critical, because it's no point having a a plan that has not got approval in the parliament. So that will chart the path of the industry for the next 5, 10 years or 20 years. So that's the only way you can get the political will that we've talked about in. So we want to stay away as part of the plan as well. Look at what are the things that we can do to sustain the industry. So as part of the development of tourism, even in the Bahamas, uh, we need to stay away from tourism models that has failed. So if you do not have a master plan, the tendency is we just tend to follow what everyone is doing without understanding what is the problem that you face in your own industry. So we need to stay away from models that is so focused on high tourist arrival, where the quantity is more important rather than the quality. So the tourists that will contribute directly to the local economy becomes important. So to get this quality, we need to ensure our tourism product and services can provide the experience that these tourists are looking for. So a master plan is critical because it is going to guide you all the way of how do you come up with a high quality product. How do you move from a low yield tourism destination to high yield? We want to have less tourists but have more money. The receipt should be higher. It's pointless to have high number of arrival, but the actual contribution to the local economy, the actual contribution that is going back to the local community is minimal. So we want to stay away from the short-term goal that we seem to be always looking at.
So when you think about a tourism model for a small island developing nation like the Bahamas, what are the possibilities for tourism after the pandemic? And how are those possibilities placed within the larger global context?
Yeah. So if you look at the Bahamas post COVID-19, I think what is critical, as I've said at the beginning, is number one, we are over reliant on tourism. I think these have been spoken in many forums as well. So there is a need for diversification, okay? Diversification of the local economy and also the diversification of the tourism industry itself, okay? I'm not saying to totally throw away tourism, no, but the tourism industry itself got to diversify, okay? When you talk about diversifying the tourism industry, look at agriculture, agri-tourism, look at domestic tourism. We have talked about this quite a bit, but we still do not see the domestic tourism industry really growing as it should. If you look at Bay Street, if you take a walk at Bay Street now, over the last few months since the pandemic, it's a dead town, it's a ghost town. Similarly, if you go to other countries where tourism is also an important industry, the domestic tourism is actually helping to support the industry. I originally come from Malaysia. Tourism is a big industry in Malaysia. But ever since COVID, the borders have shut down and the number of tourists have trickled down to almost zero. But the industry have not shut down because the locals are shopping, the locals are buying things, the locals are doing everything. So the economy is still moving. The domestic tourism becomes important. People are traveling, people are going within the country since they cannot leave the country. So which is fine. So we need to look at diversification of the tourism industry itself. Enhancing the local business climate is another important aspect when you talk about resilience here. We need to ensure and focus on making it easier for the local community to get into small businesses. So are our policies currently business friendly, especially when coming out of this crisis? So this is critical because many of the industry, especially the small industries, are not in good shape. Do we have a strong reserve of funds to cushion the impact of this crisis? Because remember, we are not only talking about the pandemic, but we're also talking about our annual hurricane. We have 6 months of the year we are in crisis. So if you're lucky like this year, touch wood, everything seems well. But we may have a bad year, so we need to be always prepared for this kind of strong reserve fund for us to pull through during crisis. Another important concept that has come about lately, which I've spoke about in last week's Nassau Guardian when I talked about the whole concept of regenerative travel or tourism. It's not a new concept. The concept have been around since 2007, but because of mass tourism, people have forgotten this concept of regenerative travel. Regenerative travel basically is trying to come up with products and services that will leave a place better than when you found it. Okay, leaving a place better than you found it. So post COVID, what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to move away from crowded destination. They're going to be looking for destinations that are more responsible. They want destinations that are greener, less crowded, more responsible. So if that is the case, then regenerative travel or tourism may be the way forward for global tourism, including the Bahamas as a small island developing state. Why? Because we are vulnerable economically and environmentally. So we need to start looking at the industry more micro. How are we going to manage this issue of sustainability? Sustainability, if you just want to sustain yourself, it's like a slow way to die. So what you need is regenerative. I want to make it better, not just to sustain. Because over tourism or under tourism can also kill you. So, but how do you find the right number that is going to help you to move from low yield to high yield? Because at the end of the day, the numbers are not important. The number of tourists is not important at all. What is important is how much money that you make and how do you sustain the environment that you are in? How do you sustain the people, the economy, and how do you provide the experience for the tourist that is coming here, the correct experience? The experiential tourism and travel becomes critical for us. So these are very critical when you moving forward post COVID-19, because people are going to be very conscious where they want to travel. Okay, of course, the Ministry of Tourism of the Bahamas, when they did a presentation recently, they did mention in their research that there are based on the research, tourists from the US and Canada, they are lining up to come to the Bahamas first. So we are in the top destination that people want to come. But we need to do our job over here to make sure that we can give the confidence that this destination is safe, this destination have everything in place, and it is a place that you can trust to come with your family. Okay, because post COVID-19 is going, this COVID situation is going to be around for a while. I foresee you at least until 2022, you will not go back to your norm. So until then, you'll be in some form of normalcy, but there will still be a lot of challenges. So we need to sustain. We cannot say that we're going to shut down until 2022. We can't. We have to move on. I think what the government have done now is correct. They have to open the country, but we need to make sure all our protocols are in place. We are serious about this protocol. The enforcement must be serious. The testing got to be done. If someone is sick, there's a way that for this person to be tested immediately and get the result immediately. So all these things must be put in place before the destination can before this particular destination get the confidence of the tourists worldwide and all to come to the Bahamas.
So evolving and adapting in a way that strikes a balance moving forward for tourism development. This is actually a good place for us to take a break. This is University Drive. We're talking tourism and we're talking sustainable tourism with Dr. Vic Nair at University of the Bahamas. We'll take a break and be back after this.
Wash your hands. Protect yourself and help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Wash your hands properly and often, especially after you've been in a public place, used the bathroom, touched any surface or item, taken out the trash, handled pets, or after blowing your nose, coughing, or sneezing. First, wet your hands. Use soap, lather, and scrub for 20 seconds at least. Then rinse your hands for 10 seconds. Towel or air dry. Use a paper towel to turn off the tap. Don't forget to wash between your fingers, under your fingernails, and the top of your hands. If soap and water are not readily available, use a hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Use the sanitizer, cover all surfaces of your hands, and rub them together until they feel dry. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health Surveillance Unit and University of the Bahamas.
To protect yourself and others from COVID-19, stay home as much as possible and avoid close contact with others. Wear a mask that covers your nose and mouth when you leave home. Wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds or use alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Practice social distancing. If you must leave home, stay at least 6 feet away from other people and disinfect items you must touch. Limit in-person contact as much as possible. To prevent the spread of COVID-19 if you're sick, avoid public transportation, ride-sharing, or taxis. Stay home if you're sick, except to get medical care. Remember to call ahead first. Separate yourself from other people and pets in your home. Everyone is at risk of getting COVID-19. Older adults and people of any age who have serious underlying medical conditions may be at higher risk for more severe illness. This message is brought to you by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and University of the Bahamas.
Here we are back on University Drive. We are talking responsible tourism with Dr. Vic Nair. Dr. Nair, how do we balance the interests of being responsible, of being sustainable, of protecting the environment and promoting culture and ecotourism, while at the same time making the kind of revenue flow that we're used to, or the kind of revenue that can help us to hit the high note for tourism? How do we balance those interests?
Yes, that's an important question here. Finding the right balance. So it's critical. It is difficult. It is not easy to find the right, because it's always a challenge, especially in a small island developing state, in finding the right balance between environmental sustainability versus economic development. So if you look at the current state we are in, the health pandemic have resulted in economic pandemic. So how do you find the right balance? Because I want to protect the environment, but at the same time, I got to make sure that people can survive economically. So how do we manage that? If you look at some case studies based on my recent book that I launched, one of the interesting case study that I looked at was the country Bhutan. If you look at the country Bhutan, if you look at the whole model of responsible tourism in Bhutan, they have moved away from using the GDP, the gross domestic product, to actually measure the national development. So instead, they have moved into GNH, or you call that the gross national happiness. Okay, they have this gross national happiness index to actually measure the success of the nation. So if you look at Bhutan, Bhutan is a small country. It's a small landlocked Himalayan country to about 700,000 people. So it's a small country, slightly, if you look at the population, it's slightly bigger than the Bahamas. So if you look at the gross national happiness index that they have used, they have about 9 domain indicators to actually measure when you say a country is happy with where they are in terms of sustainability, in terms of being responsible. They look at the psychological well-being of the people. They look at the health. They look at the education side. They look at the time use. Time use here basically means what is the balance, the work-life balance that people over there. Do they have proper sleep? So all these things becomes important. They look at the ecological diversity. They look at the resilience of this ecological diversity. they look at their living standard, they look at the governance structure, and then they also look at the community vitality. Okay, so if you look, these are important as a human being. These are important dimension. But if you see most countries across the globe, the focus have always been on GDP. So the problem when you focus on GDP is it's a number game. The more is the better. It's not, the game is not on quality. So to find the right balance where you have good number of tourists that is bringing good number of income is the game that we are playing. We're trying to make sure, okay, there's good number of tourists is coming. At the same time, we are also attracting responsible tourists. So we do not want to attract tourists that may do more harm to the local environment, and also the bringing over a culture that you do not want to introduce locally here. So social culturally, it can be bad as well. So you need to find the right balance, because when you talk about especially rural destination, family islands, it's very critical what sort of tourists that is being attracted, and how is the youth there being influenced by what is happening in the tourism industry. Because that is the reason why more and more of this youth are moving away from the islands, and they're coming to the city. They're coming to Nassau, they're coming to Freeport. So they seem to move away from all these islands because they see a better future in this city. But if you can provide the quality that is expected in all these islands, and it is creating sufficient income, sufficient receipt in terms of tourism, then there's no reason at all for these family islands to do badly, and there's no reason at all for people to migrate from island. So what is critical now is, how do we find the right balance? I mean, there is no formula for it, but we have to work on it. So that is where your master plan again comes in place. You need a proper master plan that is going to take you through socially, environmentally, in economically, and move the country, the main islands, and also the outer islands.
So back to the example with Bhutan that you wrote about in your newly released book. Is that a best practice standard to develop a tourism index with indicators?
It is one of the best standard, but these standards works very well in small countries. So Bhutan being a small country, it is easy for them to manage this. So if as a tourist, if you want to visit Bhutan, it is expensive. So you'll be shocked that it is not so cheap to get into Bhutan and get into a travel package to go around Bhutan. It is expensive. There's a lot of levy and tax that is imposed on tourists coming in. Why? Because all this money is going back to the local community, is going back to important areas of the country where the gross national happiness is actually measured. So this example can be used. It is one of the examples that we can actually use to look at how we actually structure the whole industry over here. But at the same time, over here in the Caribbean, especially in the Bahamas, we are very much influenced by our neighbors. Okay, so our close big neighbor is seem to be driving the tourism industry over here. So the bulk of our tourists is coming from our neighboring country, and when the neighboring country stop coming in, then you are stuck all of a sudden. So so that is why it is very critical for us to find models that can work, and or we need to be brave enough to come up with a unique model that seem to work in a small island destination like the Bahamas over here. So there's a lot of best practice across the globe. There's no one example that is going to fit everyone. We are unique. This country is unique, and the culture, the people, the environment over here. So we need to work around that. But what is important at the end of the day is, let's work on a proper master plan for this, for moving the tourism industry to be more responsible and more sustainable.
Is that something that the Tourism Development Corporation that you're working in conjunction with can focus on, or can advocate for, or can lead the charge in along with the university?
The Tourism Development Corporation currently is, I'm working closely in terms of a product development. In fact, we've been doing a lot of work in community-based tourism. We've ran some workshops just before the pandemic in Bimini in trying to introduce the best practice for community-based tourism and how the community can take charge of the tourism industry. And we've also currently I'm working on a community-based tourism index that can be used for the Bahamas. At the same time, the role of Ministry of Tourism becomes more and more important in trying to see how we can actually work through this new environment that we are in, this post-pandemic situation. We are going to be opening our borders soon, and how can we ensure that we are ready at the ground? Okay, we need to be very sure on that. So TDC, the Tourism Development Corporation, is very much focused on the product and services, and they're doing a lot. And I know it is a challenge, especially in the current situation that we are in. But as we slowly open the doors, the University of the Bahamas is also working very closely. And we are also going to be working very closely with the Ministry of Tourism and also the other ministries that are also dealing with the tourism sector. One example is we are currently also working with the Ministry of Environment on another project in East Grand Bahama, where the ecotourism concept is also as important in the project. So it is across the country. It is very much focused on trying to do good for the environment, trying to do good for the benefit of the local community.
So is community-based tourism the same thing as responsible rural tourism, or is there a difference?
It's a subset. So responsible rural tourism is or rural tourism is a broader picture, and within the whole concept of responsible rural tourism, you have community-based tourism, because within rural tourism you do not need to have community. It can be wildlife tourism, it can be adventure tourism, but community-based tourism is very much relying on the community. The community take charge, the community owns it, and the community runs the show. As part of the whole concept, community-based tourism, in many countries, they also have what they call the homestay concept. So it's similar to the bed and breakfast or Airbnb, but when you use the homestay concept, the difference is you stay with the family within the same house. I mean, you had in the past the people to people concept over here. So it's the same. So the community open their doors, you stay with the community, and you dine with them, you live through their culture, you go to work with them and see what are they doing. If they are fishermen, you follow them. If they are into the farm, then you go into the farm and understand what's happening. So that concept have worked very well in Asia, where the homestay program is really doing well, especially in Southeast Asia, where they're attracting a lot of tourists from countries where the whole concept of rurality has disappeared. Because if you look at the whole concept of rural tourism, when you compare developing nation versus a developed nation, is different. In a developing nation, the word rurality seems to have a negative connotation. When you say someone is from a rural side, immediately you have a negative picture of it. You say, oh, okay, rural, or may not be clean, may not be safe, or things are cheap in rural side. That's the connotation that you have when you talk about rurality. But in a developing country, it's quite different. When you say rural, it means countryside. People are willing to pay a lot of money to go back to nature. So, and that is what is going to happen post-COVID. People are moving into that. So rural tourism is going to be a boom after this. So if you do not manage it well, then you're going to lose. Because if you look at the Family Island is a perfect place. It's a perfect island for a lot of the tourists to come, because they're going to be away from everybody. You got the whole beach by yourself. So we need to make sure that we are doing a great job in marketing this. We are doing a great job in managing this product and services within. We do not want to attract tourists to come here and there's a lot of frustration and they don't feel safe. So we don't want that. We want to make sure everything is safe, as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Okay, the test is done, you have this done, everything is put in place, and you come here, you have a good time, and you go back safe. So that is critical. That is so only countries that are able to do that will be able to sustain, or else if you saw the statistic that I've given you at the beginning, you're going to be part of the statistics where the tourism industry is not bouncing back, because the IDP report recently basically have shown that the industry is going to struggle for the next few years. So we're going to take the small step, but what is critical is we got to get our act right internally before this tourist comes on board. Because if the word of mouth that goes out to say that, okay, we've come there, we've experienced and things were bad, then it is going to impact us even worse. So we got to make sure everything's in place before we start opening our borders.
So based on all that you've said, does there need to be a re-education or a reorientation of citizens so that they can see the potential and possibilities and then think about new ways to make a livelihood on these concepts, based on these concepts?
Yes, I think there's a lot of things that I think the government got to do as well. At the same time, the concept of responsible tourism must be put in place everywhere, right from teaching the kids from right at the school level all the way what is responsible tourism. Okay, it is not just talking about tourism. Tourism is critical, but we got to understand that it is not just tourism, but it has to be responsible tourism. So this is critical moving forward for the Bahamas to stay relevant. So we got to stay away from, I know we seem to be always focusing on this mega tourism development, and we got to really focus on this boutique tourism development. Okay, we must have large number of boutique tourism development, because this boutique tourism development basically helps directly the local community. So this is managed by the local community. So generally, boutique hotels and destination have a small capacity, enabling them to improve the quality of the tourism services and to become quickly market leaders compared to this mega tourism development. If you look at the mega ones, the problem with the mega ones is when you have a massive crisis like what you face now, they just shut and they go. And what happens when they shut and go? You're going to impact the employment situation in the country, because they're too big, they're huge. But in a boutique tourism development, it is more resilient compared to this mega development. So moving forward, I think that is another area that we need to really think about. What we have currently is sufficient. We do not want to have more and more of this huge mega development, because when you have a huge mega development, the impact economically is good in the short term, but in the long term, when things go wrong, especially now in a location where crisis is norm here. Okay, having hurricane is norm over here. Every year we pray and hope that it's just passing through and the impact is not so severe. But you know what happened in 2019 with Dorian? It was something that we did not expect at all. And with climate change, you can expect more of this. So the best approach is look for this boutique type of development that will allow you to be more sustainable compared to this huge mega development. I'm not against mega development, but I see in small destinations like the Bahamas, mega development can be worrying when you are also dealing with crisis. If it's a short-term crisis, it's fine. But then in a pandemic situation like what we are facing now, which is, yes, it is unique. It is one of a kind. The last you had it in 1918. But a lot of research basically of late has come out to say that you may be seeing many more of this sort of pandemic in the future. So we got to just evolve to change our own behavior of how do we deal with this crisis.
There's a theme in your book that relates to harmony between human activity and nature. How do we get closer to that?
Yeah, so trying to find a balance between the harmony between human and nature is critical, because at the end of the day, for the Bahamas, what is critical is the nature that you are in, the environment that you are in. So if I draw the three circles of the economy, the environment, and social, I will put the environment as the biggest circle for the Bahamas. And then I do a balance between the social cultural, and also the economy inside the environment. So the environment is critical. Without the environment, the country is gone. So that is why we have to be worried about climate change, because climate change is going to impact us. And I'm surprised that we in the Bahamas, we don't talk so much about climate change. We have set up at the University of the Bahamas now because we realize that this climate change is critical. So we have set up the center to look at climate change. This is critical because not many people talk about it. We don't have many politicians talking about climate change, but the impact is real. This is not fake news. It is real. So we need to understand the impact that the environmental change that is happening across the globe is going to impact us the most. So we will end up becoming environmental refugees soon if we are not careful about it. So so we need to be more conscious. We need to be more conscious of finding the right harmony between human and nature in all the sectors, not just tourism, but whichever sector that you're in. I think that is critical for small island developing state, because that is your survival. Your future generation may not be able to enjoy what you're enjoying today. And that is exactly what the whole concept of sustainable development is all about. So are we doing good? Are we doing right to sustain the environment for the future generation? So this is very critical.
So then what is the role of the academy, the university, in leading that kind of change that needs to happen?
What we are doing at the University of the Bahamas currently, we do have the Small Island Sustainability Research Complex. So this complex is tasked to actually look at sustainability across various disciplines, the sciences, the social sciences, the humanities and arts. So it is cutting across all the other areas as well. Because when you talk about climate change and environment, you cannot just look at from the angle of sciences, because most people tend to look at the sciences. You have all this data, but how does this data impact the human? How does this impact on the social aspect of it? How does it impact on the policy? Then we do have the Government and Public Policy Institute that looks at the policy as well. So we have all these centers that is in place to work in hand with the government in trying to make sure that what we are trying to roll out in the country is something that is relevant. We want to ensure that there is sufficient evidence for certain policies to come in place. At the same time, we are also currently at the university working on our doctoral program. So we are hoping, if all goes well, the first doctoral program to be launched in spring. And this doctoral program is very much focused on research. So climate change, small island developing situation that you have in the country is going to be the main focus of this program that we're trying to launch. We're trying to bring in research because there's a lot of research that needs to be done. We need a lot of data so that the policymakers are able to make a sound decision based on data that is in hand. So a lot of work that is happening currently at the university. We are having series of workshops and webinars, very much trying to focus on trying to change the way how the industry functions across not just the tourism, but across all the other discipline as well.
So it seems to me that at the root of a lot of what you've said is the need for a change in attitudes and perceptions. Is that so?
Yes, very much. The attitude and perception is critical. We cannot be very short term. That is very critical as well. We cannot be looking at trying to move quickly into something without realizing the impact. So we have a lot of challenge, because what is critical for us currently is trying to bridge that, trying to reach the local community and trying to speak to them in terms of their attitude towards the industry, the attitude towards being more responsible, because at the end of the day, you want to sustain your livelihood. So you have to change your attitude. If you do not change your attitude, you may not be able to sustain your livelihood because you have overdone it in terms of carrying capacity, in terms of the limit that you are supposed to do certain thing and you have overdone it, you're going to destroy it. So at the end of the day, the attitude of the people got to change. You cannot be you cannot be aiming to get fast money quickly and then you're not able to sustain it in the future. So if you do well, if you manage well, you give the service well, the experience is great, you're going to get tourists coming back to you, you're going to get people coming back to you, and you can sustain yourself. So the attitude of how you manage your businesses, your small businesses, becomes more and more important.
For me, 2020 is gone, and we have to focus now on 2021 and moving forward. How should we approach or view us heading into 2021 and the kinds of things that we have to focus on and prepare for so that we are stronger and more resilient in tourism?
Yeah, 2021, as we come out of this situation of the pandemic, there got to be change in the way how we look at the industry on the whole. I think a lot of things I've discussed today very much is focusing on how do we stay resilient, because the crisis that you have now, the crisis that is going to come in the future is going to always be there, but we got to stay resilient. So we got to change the way how we operate at all levels, right? From diversifying the economy to enhancing the local business climate, making sure we have sufficient strong reserve funds, looking at moving into regenerative tourism that I talked about, focusing on recovery is also very much looking at how innovative we are in our tourism product. What is the marketing narrative that you want to give for people coming on board, coming to the country? Good storylines that can be used for recovery, media, and branding to brand the country. Looking at engaging the local community and industry stakeholders in trying to develop a well-being focused intervention that is going to help the local community build back high quality place to live and visit. So at the end of the day, remember, what is important is also when you develop tourism, it's not just for the tourists, it is also for the people who are living there. Okay, so remember, a great place to live is a great place to visit. If the local community is living in a bad place, living in a place that is so difficult, it is not a good place to visit as well. So that is critical. So we need to have sufficient data. So that is another thing that we need to talk about. Build and trust the confidence of the destination can only happen if we have good system and processes in place that can give us the data so that we are confident of the situation at the ground. Planning, how the collaboration between the government, the local community, and the private sector becomes critical, because you are a small country, so everyone have to jointly collaborate. So it is not just the government's role to develop tourism. There's a role that the private sector got to do. There's a role that the local community themselves got to play. And there's also a role that the university have to play. So it is an inclusive destination planning. All these stakeholders have to play their part. So moving to 2021, I know I'm speaking in general, but there's a lot of things that we have to really look at. So the more I speak to you, I think I got to put this in paper. I got to put this in writing and look at what are the 10 important things that we need to do for the next 1 or 2 years to remain relevant, to remain sustainable, to remain responsible, because that is going to be the new norm for the tourists of tomorrow.
So Responsible Rural Tourism in Asia is the name of the book you co-edited that just came out. Tell us where we can find it, because I'm sure that there are some lessons for the Bahamas in there.
Yes, this is a good opportunity for you to get the book, because the publisher Channel View publisher have actually offered a 75% discount until the 30th of October. The book is priced at $149 US, but with the discount, you only pay at $38 US. And how do you find this? You can go to the publisher's website, which is actually www.channelview publication. Is one word. Channel, CHANNEL, View, VIEW, publications, PUBLICATIONS.com. So Channel View Publication. So once you go to Channel View Publication website, they have a search box there. Just type rural tourism and my book will pop out. So once my book pop out, what you need to put when you buy the book is there's a code. There's a promotion code. What you need to type there is just RRTA. RRTA is basically a short form for Responsible Rural Tourism Asia. You type in RRTA 75 in one word. That is the promotion code. The moment you put in the code, you get a discount of 75%. But this 75% is only given for hardcover book, not for the ebook. If you want an ebook, it's only about 40 US. You can straight away buy it. But if you want a hardcover book, then you put the discount code RRTA 75 and you get the book delivered to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you again for joining us here on University Drive. You know, you always have an open-ended invitation to rejoin us, Dean of Graduate Studies and Research, and also Professor of Sustainable Tourism at University of the Bahamas, Dr. Vic Nair. Thanks again for joining us. And thank you to everybody for listening. We'll be back next week, same time, same station.
University Drive is a production of the Office of University Relations and the Communications and Creative Arts Academic Unit at University of the Bahamas. All rights reserved.